I am the Ascended Master Lanto, the Chohan of the second ray. We have each chosen to focus on a particular issue or a couple of issues that from our particular ray seems the most important contribution that can be made at this time for bringing Europe into the Golden Age. Thus, I will, from the perspective of the second ray, which is the way of wisdom, focus on which particular application of wisdom could assist people the most in awakening to the Golden Age consciousness. In order to explain this, I want to start out by talking about what most people in a more developed part of the world have learned about money. You know, of course, that there are many people who live at such severe levels of poverty that they do not have much money to spend, and therefore do not have some of the concerns that you have when you have surplus money that are not needed for the bare physical survival of yourself and your family. You have in the last generation especially seen that in many countries the majority of the population have been in this state of affluence where they had more money than was absolutely needed for their physical, material survival and sustenance. This then has raised an entirely different way of looking at money, where you suddenly have the choices of what to do with your money. But what have many people learned from this experience? They have learned that there are people out there who are out to get your money and who will seek to manipulate the money away from you through various schemes. Some may be relatively innocent in a sense that they make you buy something or buy some experience that you don't really need, that isn't very important for you, but that gives you maybe some cheap, brief sense of entertainment. But many people have also learned that there are more severe scams and schemes that are aimed at taking money away from you, even to the point of taking more than your surplus, but taking everything that you have. This might be anything from various con artist tricks to the greater con artist tricks of the manipulation of the economy, the manipulation of markets, and the manipulation of various pension funds and schemes that were supposed to be there for your retirement, but suddenly may not be there through to some manipulation. So what have people learned from all of this? They have learned that they need to be aware of what they do with their money. Before they give their money to someone, they need to consider what those people are going to do with it. Is it still going to be there for you? Is it really going to multiply 10,000 times as they promise you? Or is it just too good to be true? Thus, you see that most people have developed this growing awareness that before you give out money, you need to make a careful, conscious evaluation of what the consequences will be, because once the money is out of your hand or bank account, you have no guarantee that you can get it back. And so this is, of course, a step up in people's awareness. From the second ray of wisdom, we are always looking at how can we increase people's awareness, their level of wisdom. And Mother Mary has talked about the wisdom of the mother, of what can happen in the physical octave, how things work in the physical octave. And what I'm talking about people's awareness about money, is very much an aspect of the wisdom of the mother, where you realize that you have to be careful in the material world what you do with your money. So then, if I, as the Chohan of the second ray, was to point to one particular thing that could give the most important contribution to the bringing in of the golden age in terms of wisdom, it would be that people gained an awareness that is similar to what they have learned about giving away money, but it was applied to the field of giving away their energy. Money is a physical substance, but as you all know, the real currency of the world is energy, your emotional, mental, and identity energy. Most of the people in the world, of course, are not aware of this. And that is why the greatest revolution of thought that we can envision from the second ray, and I know that the other Chohans can envision their own greatest revolution of thought, but from my perspective on the second ray, it really would be that people became aware that there are forces in this world who seek to steal their energy and who have invented all kinds of schemes in order to take energy away from them. This, of course, begins with a recognition that when you are living in extreme poverty, just physical survival can be such a struggle that it takes up all of your energy. You have no surplus energy to give. It is all tied into just surviving. I'm not thereby saying that your energy isn't being stolen by demons, because of course the people who are in extreme poverty are very much trapped there by demons. But what I'm pointing out to you is that when you become more physically affluent and have what Master Moore talked about, spare time, you also increase your energy level because you are not spending so much energy on material, physical survival, and therefore you have energy left over. And this, of course, now means that you become the target of all of these schemes where forces and people seek to steal your emotional, mental, and identity energy away from you. You also need the recognition that there are beings, forces that are existing in this world that need to steal your energy in order to survive. There are people in physical embodiment who need to steal energy from others in order to stay in physical embodiment. There are also those who need to steal energy in order to exercise the power they have. All of the dictators you have seen in history have stolen energy from their followers in order to exercise whatever power they exercised. But people also need to become aware that there are beings in the emotional, mental, and identity realms who likewise need to steal their energy in order to continue to survive or in order to continue to exercise power. And why do these beings need to steal energy? Because they have lowered their consciousness to the point where they can no longer receive energy from the spiritual realm. Now, I realize full well that to give the average person this awareness will require quite a process. It is not something that can happen overnight, because people need to know many things. You need to understand also that you are actually a spiritual being, that there is a level of reality beyond the material, and that the entire material realm is created and sustained by a flow of energy from the spiritual realm into the 4 levels of the material universe. And you need to understand that this energy flows into the material world through those beings who are not cut off from the flow because they haven't lowered their consciousness beyond the critical level. Now you know well that on the physical level, the more money you have, the more you become a target for those who want to steal it. And people need to recognize that the same holds true with energy. Some people have more energy, more light than others, and they are the ones who become a target. And therefore they are the ones that need to be more aware. Yet all people need to be aware, because all people in the more affluent countries are definitely the target of the lower forces who want to steal their energy. This is such a widespread phenomenon that I almost hesitate to tell you more about it, because I know that the vast majority of the people on this planet would be so overwhelmed if they knew how many schemes are created for the sole purpose of stealing people's energy. These schemes may be presented at the physical level as having some necessity, or even doing a good deed, serving a good cause. But in reality, they are aimed at only one thing: stealing people's energy. Now, while it may sound as if it would be a big leap for the average person to come to accept this, I can also tell you that, seen from my perspective, the acceptance of these ideas is not as far off as you might think. Otherwise, why would I bother presenting them if only a few could grasp them? Many people know about the idea, the concept of vampires that will suck your blood. But it is not such a big leap to realize that although physical vampires do not exist, there are energy vampires that will steal your energy. There are, of course, also people in the physical who will use physical violence to steal people's energy. There is also a growing awareness of energy, meaning what we might call mental or psychic energy. More and more people are becoming aware of this. More and more people are becoming sensitive to negative energies or positive energies, and you have many people who have even entered a race to get more and more positive energy, to feel good vibrations, to feel a good mood, a good environment. So there is indeed already a growing awareness of energy and the importance of energy. And that is why it is indeed time that those of you who are more aware make the calls into the collective consciousness to pull up on those who can be pulled up, and to realize that they need to be as careful with how they spend their energy as with how they spend their money. And how do you spend energy? Well, you spend energy, of course, through your physical activities. Many physical activities are aimed at stealing your energy. There are, of course, many examples, from the very severe to the seemingly benign. One of the most severe is, of course, torture. You realize that while there was a time where torture was being reduced in the world, in recent decades, torture has actually increased. The violations of people, their human rights, the application of torture has increased, and this is even done at a governmental level in many nations. And torture is a physical activity that has the primary purpose of stripping people of their emotional, mental, and identity energy so that the dark forces, the demons, can use it for their survival or to increase their power. This is why virtually every dictator in the history of the world has had to execute or torture or both a certain amount of people in order to get enough energy to feed the demons that give power to the human being in embodiment. You may think, as some do, that Hitler had great power, or that Stalin or Mao had great power, but they had very little personal power. They had surrendered themselves to some very powerful demons because they had an ambition of exercising power in the physical world. And they were literally willing to sell their souls to the devil in order to have that power here on earth. But of course, between the extreme ranges of war and torture and the more benign activities, there's a great range of these physical activities. Let me mention just one. Many sporting games where people get completely worked up into a state of frenzy, yelling and screaming, rooting for their home team, rooting against the other team, have the effect of draining people's energy. Any kind of substance that alters your consciousness, drugs or alcohol, tobacco included, also allows demons and entities to steal your energy. But there are many seemingly benign activities that do the same. Many movies, in fact, I am tempted to say all movies, but that is not entirely accurate, as there is a very small percentage of movies that do not steal your energy. But many movies are direct energy drains. This applies especially to very violent movies or what you call horror movies that are aimed at scaring you. But there are also many ways of stealing your energy through getting your sympathy, to getting you to engage in an activity where you feel empathy or pity with other people. And now I am not trying to overwhelm you and get you to feel that you cannot engage in any activity, but I am trying to make you more aware and more sensitive. And I'm especially speaking to the collective consciousness that there is a need to increase your sensitivity. It is not so black and white that an activity can only drain your energy and that therefore your only option is to not engage in the activity. There are many of the more benign activities where if you are in a certain state of consciousness and you are not aware, then your energy can be stolen. But at the same time, you can engage in that activity without having your energy stolen. So this goes with the increased awareness. Then, of course, there are many activities that are not directly physical, although they have a physical counterpart, and they are truly aimed at creating such an emotional reaction in you that it sets up a pattern in your emotional body. I understand that there are certain activities that create an emotional reaction, such as a sporting game, but there are also certain activities or matrices that are created at the emotional level in order to program your emotional body to respond a certain way when you are exposed to specific situations. A person who regularly goes to football games and always gets very hyperactive about it has already created or had created certain matrices in his emotional body that causes him to be drawn to the football games and to react a certain way. It causes people to not feel that they are getting enough of it and they want more and more. Then, of course, there are activities in the mental realm. And there again are many that are aimed at just keeping you engaged, as Mother Mary said, in these petty problems that really have no solution and will not make a contribution to bringing forth a golden age. These are so numerous that I will not mention them, but there are many, many such activities that have that singular purpose of engaging your mind in thinking you are working for a good cause, thinking you are actually helping to solve a particular problem, but there is no solution to the problem. There is, however, also another category of these kind of mental activities that I wish to make you aware of, because it is not something we have spoken so much about so far. You know that we have talked about the fallen beings seeking to trap you into the epic mindset, where there is seemingly some cause that is so important that it is a matter of life and death or the collapse of the planet that this problem is solved. But beyond this, you need to recognize that the function of your mental body is to explain things, to give you an explanation for why something is happening. There is nothing particularly good or bad or evil about this. It is simply the function of the mental body. It is meant to analyze, to understand, to compare, to look at what happens, look at what the consequences of a certain choice is, so you can evaluate before you make a choice. And so the fallen beings have learned to take advantage of this, because they know that whatever you experience, whatever you see on earth, your mental body will want to come up with an explanation. It will want to understand this. And so the fallen beings have learned that there are many things they can do, many things, schemes they can create, that where they do something that violates people, but there is no reason for it other than they want to make people confused, because they know that people will seek out an explanation, but there is no explanation. The fallen beings are doing this deliberately to confuse your mental bodies and to induce a state of doubt, or even in the emotional body a state of fear, because you cannot understand why this is happening. You cannot understand why people are doing this. Why are people behaving like this? You seek a rational explanation. You seek a cause and effect, but you cannot see any cause. You cannot see any rational explanation. And so your mental body gets engaged in seeking this explanation where there is none. And the only way out of it is to realize what the fallen beings are trying to do, and then refuse to engage your mental body in this, always wanting an explanation. As an obvious example, people have often thought to understand why a serial killer will go on a killing spree and seemingly randomly kill people. The fallen beings know that your rational, intellectual mind wants to understand why this happened, so that you can protect yourself or that you can protect society from this happening again. You think that if something happened, there must be a rational explanation, there must be some sequence of causes that led up to this effect. And if you can understand what the sequence was in that particular instance, you might be able to prevent it in other instances. So psychologists have engaged in this game of trying to analyze how serial killers think, what their upbringing was, how the subconscious mind works, in order to find a rational explanation. But in many cases, there is no rational explanation. The explanation is that some fallen beings were trying to create this confusion, and they were able to have demons that took over the mind of a particular person and caused him to go on this killing spree. And this is the only explanation there is. You cannot go in and analyze the mind of the serial killer and find a rational explanation for this, because it was not his mind that was doing the killing, it was the mind of the demons who had taken him over. And they have no reason. You cannot go in and say, well, why did the demon choose to kill that person and not that person? There is no rational explanation for this. So you need to, as the spiritual people, recognize that your mind always wants an explanation. And as you become aware of the spiritual path, you want to understand everything. And you think that if you have a spiritual teaching, it should be possible to explain everything. But you need to be more aware here. There is an explanation for everything. And so you might look at a serial killer and say, there is an explanation, and I have just given that explanation to you. But as I said, there is no spiritual teaching that can go into the mind of that person and say why exactly this happened. You can go into the mind of the person and you can see when did that person, most likely in a past life, start the downward path that caused the person to gradually surrender more and more of its mind to dark forces. You can do this, but you cannot give a direct analytical cause and effect sequence that is understandable to the intellectual mind. At least you cannot do so by looking at that particular person, that particular lifetime, and any conditions in that person's lifetime that led to this. So therefore you will see that the scientists, the psychologists, will never get to the bottom of these issues because they are approaching it from a limited perspective. The same applies to some of the world events you have seen. You can go into the mind of Adolf Hitler and you can try to analyze based on his upbringing and this and that. And psychologists have been doing this since the 1940s and 50s. But have they gotten anywhere closer to understanding why Hitler did what he did? Not really, in terms of fully understanding it, because they all realize, if they have investigated this, that there were other people who had a very similar childhood but who did not become mass murderers. And so how do you explain this? And again, as I said earlier, you cannot understand a person like Adolf Hitler without understanding that he had such an ambition about having power on earth that he was willing to sell his soul to the dark forces beyond the physical octave, who could give him that power by literally giving him the power to manipulate people's emotional and mental and identity bodies, by making them feel that they were the superhumans belonging to the super race, and therefore it was perfectly rational, and they had the absolute right to do what they did in terms of suppressing and eradicating other people. This all started in the identity, mental and emotional bodies of the German people. You cannot find a physical explanation, and you cannot even find a completely rational explanation, because again, the demons who had taken over Hitler's mind wanted to do certain things that were so outrageous, so nonsensical, so irrational, just to create confusion, just to confuse people's mental bodies. And so, this very much goes along with increasing the awareness of how your energy is stolen, because you will see that there are many activities in the world where people are frantically seeking an explanation of many of the events that are, as I have now told you, inexplicable. Of course, the second ray is very much related to the field of education. And if you take these ideas and apply them to the field of education, you will see that there are many activities in the area of education and science that are aimed at trying to explain some of these things that I am now telling you have no explanation. So what is the effect of this? It is that all of the people who, with the best of intentions, are focusing their minds on trying to understand the psychology, for example, behind mass murderers or behind certain world events. They are pouring their energy into a matrix, into a portal that allows the forces in the mental realm to steal their energy, to feed themselves on the energy, and therefore gain more power to control and affect the minds of people in embodiment. It becomes a vicious circle where the people in embodiment are feeding the beings in the mental realm, and thereby the beings in the mental realm are getting more power to manipulate people's minds, and they can steal even more energy from them. And it needs to be recognized that there are many areas of education that simply have the effect of draining people's energy. This applies not only to seeking